Folks, welcome back to the Crossing Swords podcast presented by Batavia Downs Gaming and Hotel. I am Gatesy, joined today by the one, the only Mike Bundt. Bunty, how are you doing today? We have a big Sabres game tonight.
I'm excited right now, man. It's 11 wins the last 12 games. We're talking playoffs. We're talking potential trade rumors. There's a lot going on right now in Saberland. So I am definitely dialed in. I know I told you outside of the show that recently I was already splitting season tickets with a friend. I had like 15, 16 games. I bought on for another 12. So like I'm going to be, if I'm not doing this podcast, I'm going to be at the Sabres Arena the next 2-3 months watching them hopefully try to end the drought and get into the playoffs.
Yeah, the buzz is there not only from us, but it feels like kind of everywhere, even the national media. We had, all the fun with Biz over the winning streak and him trying to join on to feel like really tank the season for the Sabres. It didn't really feel natural in that front, but the Sabres are getting a lot of spotlight. We saw Tage Thompson on Chicklets just the other day. There's a lot to be excited about. And since our last show, the Sabres lost in Columbus for what would have been their 11th win. And then they had a big bounce back win against Vancouver the other night where it got a little dicey. What are your thoughts on this team, Bunty, right now where we're seeing, the Sabres either lose a game in Columbus, you have that Vancouver game, which is a little bit everywhere. What are your thoughts on the team kind of coming out of this big winning streak?
Yeah, right now you got to feel good about this team. They're playing solid hockey. They're good in the metrics too. So it's not just a lucky win streak that they're putting together. The metrics back it up. The eye test backs it up. So I'm feeling pretty good. The beginning of the streak when they were on the West Coast, there was a little bit of holding on for dear life and winning some games that maybe they had some breaks go their way. But as the streak went on, it started to evolve. And you saw games against Boston, St. Louis, and then Dallas, where the Sabres really just brought it and gave it to their opponents. And you knew it was going to eventually come to an end. And predictably, it always happens whenever they're trying to get the franchise record 11th in a row. But one stinker against Columbus isn't the end of the world. And they bounced back in a big way against Vancouver, against a team that they needed to take care of business against. And they got the job done. So now hopefully they can put another nice streak together.
We can only hope. And we're seeing the Sabres take care of business when we can. We're about to be joined by a man who's always taking care of business, VC3 Vinny Cristiano. Sir, how are you doing today?
I'm great. What a better mood I think I'm in than last time I got a chance to talk to you guys.
Yeah, I think you were on the road, and then the Sabres were, I think, also on the road in the midst of not winning a road game in regulation in like 250 plus days. So, a lot has changed since then. A 10-game winning streak certainly helps there, but how are you feeling about the Sabres right now coming out of that win streak, kind of getting back to a seems more sustainable level where they're not going to win their final 55 games of the year?
Yeah, I could see them winning 53 of them, but definitely not all 55. But look, I think it's hard to not be overwhelmingly, maybe not overwhelmingly, but you have to think or be positive. And I admit that I am that way. And part of the reason for that, and kind of got a chance to hear, Bunty, what you were saying, which is that the metrics are supporting what they're doing. What they seem to have done has become sustainable. And one of the things that I've been weary about over this stretch of them winning, 11 of 12 is that it's kind of hard for me, and I'm sure a lot of Sabres fans, to not compare this to the 10-game winning streak in 2018, 2019, when ultimately they got to the top of the league at that point. And so I think I was a little concerned, but being able to compare those two things has maybe calmed those concerns a little bit more, because the trepidation comes from, well, we saw how badly that season ended. They went from being the best team in the NHL just in terms of points, and that win streak seemed to show that on the, in the middle of, again, a long playoff drought, which at the time, if you would have told us, hey, this team completely fell apart at the end of the year. Also, by the way, they're still not going to make the playoffs until perhaps the year 2026. And again, we don't even know yet because we're just past the halfway point of the season. I would have been, I don't know. I don't think it's a great idea to say that, because I think a lot of people would have been really sad. But in saying that, you can compare these two streaks and notice that there are significant differences This most recent one being the more, I'll call it quote unquote realistic of the two. Unfortunately, the realistic one came at a time where the rest of the East is also winning. And so it almost doesn't seem like there's as many tangible effects of it. Want to go back to pessimism? Hey, maybe that means like you could argue at least we're doing like actual realistic winning and sustainable winning. Of course it would happen when everyone else in the East is also doing that, preventing us from really leapfrogging everybody.
100%. I think JFresh it might have been Sabermetrics today put something out where it showed the standings of the Eastern Conference, and every team in their last game has a win. I don't know how that math has worked out where it was literally every team has at least a W1 next to their streak. It's truly impressive. And I think it was Bunty you were saying last time, or I might have been a trainer today actually, where, the Sabres just last week were, a couple points out of a playoff spot. They go 4-1, or they're 1 point out of a playoff spot. They go 4-1, and they're 1 point out of a playoff spot. It feels like every team in the East is winning right now. And, at least we can say the Sabres are also winning a big game tonight against the Rangers. But Bunty, I want to ask you that Vancouver game, we saw the Sabres go up 4-0, a fun affair. KeyBank was rocking. I know you were boots on the ground for that game. What was the atmosphere like? And were you, what was your concern level through that third period where they get one with 10 minutes to go and then, 2 goals in a minute span? It's like, okay, it's 4-3 now. What are we going to see from the Sabres team? So walk me through just your thought process during that third period.
Yeah, obviously when they make it 4-0, you think it's game over. Even when it was 3-0, it felt like it was pretty much game over. 4-1, wasn't worried. 4-2, there's less than 5 minutes left. You're not happy, but you feel like they're going to put it away. 4-3, 30 seconds later, and you're a little bit nervous. You're like, come on, like this is the Canucks you're playing. You're not playing the Colorado Avalanche right now. Find a way to finish it off. And I wouldn't say that at that moment I thought it was likely that they were going to blow it, but you do have it in your back of your mind, like
the thoughts are there.
They could blow this. And the arena, unlike a lot of past periods during the drought, they actually kind of rallied behind them, kind of like gave them some cheers, not mock cheers, but kind of rallied behind them a little bit. And they were able to close the job. Now, it made it kind of anticlimactic that Josh Doan just scores an empty netter from basically the entire length of the ice. So if he doesn't hit the net there and that's an icing, we're probably a little bit more nervous for the final 1:30 of the game. But it was a good crowd. I had a picture beforehand. It was over 17,000 on a Monday night, I believe, or was it Tuesday? I forget. I'm getting my nights mixed up right now. But
together
for an early week matchup, so you can tell people are starting to buy in. They're excited, and they rightfully should, because if we're being honest with this team right now, they're healthy. And we always said we thought they had some ingredients when they were healthy. We just never saw them healthy for the first 30 games of the season. And this is also why I think it's so sometimes premature or silly to just rule out certain guys and make broad assumptions of a team before seeing the whole collective group together. I can't tell you how many people in the offseason made fun of the Josh Norris acquisition and talked down him just because he's had injury concerns in the past. And yes, like, it's him getting hurt the first game of the season on a faceoff plays tough right into the narratives and everything. But like, you're starting to see a little bit of what Kevin Adams visioned with him on the ice. You have 3 scoring lines right now, and you have a 4th line that's playing very physical and grinding and bruising, and it's a very nice brand of hockey. And Norris makes a huge difference. Being able to put Norris and Tuck on a second line, having a guy like Doan, like who would have ever thought during the Doan Kesselring Peterka trade that the Sabres got probably an equal to Peterka, and they added a defenseman. Like, like in the trade. If we're being real, going for Peterka straight up right now would have been a pretty fair trade for both teams. And the Sabres have somebody that really has only played half the games this year and has been hurt for most of it. So I look at this team and there's a lot of ingredients. And the reason why fans should be confident and shouldn't worry about the playoff standings is they've played half their games. There's 41 more games to the season. Things are going to play out the way they're going to play out. Yes, you look at the West and you're like, oh, if the Sabres are in the West, they might be a top 4 or 5 seed. Like they might be one of the top teams in the conference if you just look at the standings. But I think it's premature to do this. There's going to be a lot of divisional matchups. Buffalo plays Montreal 3 times this month. Things are going to play out the way they're going to play out. And there's some teams in the East that I think are bound to fall off at some point. And if the Sabres keep playing like we know they're capable of, they're going to be in this race until the end. And maybe, as I said last week, maybe it's not even fighting for a wild card spot. Maybe it's fighting for one of the top 3 spots in their own division.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think one of the things that maybe worries me about that last point, and last night, or the other night rather, on WGR, Paul Hamilton was talking about this with Pat Merrill-Caro and Brian were kind of going back and forth about like the upcoming schedule. Maybe not back and forth, but like they were probably the first ones to bring it up, at least to my knowledge, that the second half of the season is maybe more the matchups with Atlantic teams specifically, and then of course teams in the East on the second half of that is more frequent. Those matchups are more frequent. And I think that is very much a double-edged sword. The first side of that is, hey, if the Sabres, if the worst portion of the Sabres season was the beginning of it, right, when they were struggling with health, which we talked about before and have talked about at length many times. If that's the worst they're going to play this season, that's good, because if they're going to play well while playing the other teams in the East, they're going to make up twice as much ground as they would if they're going to play well against the Vancouvers and the Winnipegs, and the Western Conference teams of the world. The flip side of that, though, is it's harder to make up ground if you can't sustain winning in this second half of the season. So, this 10-game win streak, flash in the pan situation is, what you could call it if it doesn't work, becomes, again, going back to that 2018-19 season, sort of irrelevant if you're not able to use it at the right time, quote unquote. So if you're figuring out your style, figuring out your lineup, and you can take this winning into those Eastern teams, it helps you immensely. But that worry coming back from that like pessimistic point of view saying, hey, we've been fooled before, does bring a little bit of concern, saying if they do fall back or they do sort of regress to the mean of, I don't know what that is. I don't know what the mean of the Sabres is, because we've seen bad and really, really good. I don't think we've necessarily seen a stretch of, that's pretty all right. Winning 3 of 5 consistently is something that like we haven't seen the Sabres do in a while. So my point in saying that, a little bit of trepidation on the second half of the season, because if they don't keep this up, it will hurt them even more than the winning helped them.
Yeah, and I didn't realize just how many Western Conference road trips they've been on until you said that, but it feels like half the games I've been up to like 11 o'clock watching them, or like a start time of 9, 10 o'clock. So we're really going to see a lot of change in that Eastern Conference standings, from really this stretch on now. And I think not only are we going to see changes there, but you feel like all the reports we're seeing from like insiders and stuff is a lot of moves are going to be done before the Olympics. That seems like a mini trade deadline. I mean, because you have 3 weeks off until your next game. So it'll be interesting to see what Yarmo does. And, that game in Vancouver or against Vancouver just felt like almost a return to that mean, where that win streak, everything was going right. That blueprint they're following perfectly of, they might give up a goal early, but they're going to play an incredible second period and shut things down the third. That didn't happen in the third, yet they still found a way to win. And I was able to work myself into a complete circle on my post-game show after the game of the 10-game win streak started with a 3-goal collapse in the third period. It feels like the only way to achieve another one is to do that same thing. So I think this is a big brain move actually from Lindy Ruff to blow, a third period lead like that, so the team can rally around and can go on another run. But in all seriousness, it's slightly concerning to see that where, you never want them to give up 3 goals in that span, but it's good to know, and we've seen throughout the course of the season that they're not going to fully fall apart and collapse. We've seen them snowball in years past when things go wrong. Look back to last year, that Colorado game, I believe it was on home ice, where they did the same thing. They lost that game, and then they lost 13 straight after that, or I guess 12 straight after that. But, it's an exciting time. And I got some stats here for you guys. We kind of hop at our next point. Goaltending has been such a big conversation this season where we saw Alex Lyon start the season hot. We, went through a stretch where it felt like UPL, Lyon, and Ellis couldn't stop anything. The Sabres were losing, and then they're starting to get hot. Now Alex Lyon's put on IR. I want to talk about UPL's last, 5 games here. After the Calgary game where he has a 7.73 save percentage, he plays at New Jersey on the win streak, has a 9.63, gives up 1. Next game against Boston, a 9.57, gives up 1. The following game, that New Year's Eve game at Dallas, gives up 1 with a 9.66. We saw the CBJ game is only lost in the stretch with an 8.82. And then last game in Vancouver, he has a 9.19, giving up 3. One, do you have a slightly bit more faith in Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen as the Sabres goaltender with Lyon out? And 2, is this what you want to see out of UPL where, there were a lot of conversations to start the year. I felt like every shot that went in, we were pulling out magnifying glass to look at the smallest detail, that's UPL's fault. They should ship him out of town. Now, at least I feel like I have a lot more confidence in him in net. He looks a lot sharper, but I want to hear from you first, Bunty. How are you feeling about the Sabres net? And are you worried at all with, Lyon missing time? And we haven't seen Ellis in a month now.
Yeah, don't ask me to say anything confidently about UPL as if I know what I'm actually talking about, because whatever I say is bound to be wrong.
They mean things then.
If I believe in him, he's gonna fall off the planet and he's gonna have like an 860 save percentage the next 5 games. If I don't believe in him, he's gonna look like a Vezina candidate for the next month and take the starter job. This is what I'll say about UPL. This has been his entire career. I'm trying to think, maddeningly inconsistent. I hope I said that right. Vinny, you're the broadcaster now. I'm the has-been. So hopefully I said the right word right there. But
I think the word you're looking for is maddeningly.
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 Damn.
Yes.
It's been 6 years since I've been on TV, Vinny. So you can't blame me. I lost my vocabulary during that time. But it's the inconsistency that's frustrating on him, because he's had stretches where he's played like one of the best goalies in the NHL, but that was a few years ago. And then he's had a lot of stretches where he looks borderline even NHL caliber. And we know he has the talent because he was an early round draft pick that the Sabres have devoted a lot of time and energy into trying to develop. And they've rewarded him with a long-term contract because they believed in him at that point in time. The thing about UPL, and I really do believe this when I say this, is he plays his best when there's almost no competition in net. And you look at the stretch when he had his best hockey in Buffalo. It was after I'm trying to think of who the starter was that year. It wasn't Hutton. I'm thinking of the guy that's in Winnipeg right now, but
Eric Comrie.
So UPL was started the year as a third stringer that year. It was between Devin Levi and Comrie, and UPL wasn't really in the picture. He was an afterthought, and to the point where people are like, just move on from him. Well, what happens? Comrie struggles mightily. He has issues staying in the net. Levi shows that he's not NHL caliber at that point, and he needed time for development. And UPL gets the net by default, and he just ran with it. And he played the best hockey of his career. Now, fast forward to this year, where I'm not saying that UPL started the year number 3, but Lyon definitely got the shot to earn the starter job early because UPL's hurt. And they bring in a very experienced minor league goalie who some people believe has some NHL upside in Colton Ellis. and he looks decent right out of the gate. UPL is in a spot where he needs to earn his opportunities, and he had some ups and downs early. Lyon was good, then he struggled. Now Lyon's playing well again. Ellis, luckily for UPL, has been out for a period of time. And when's the success happen? The success happened when UPL had a more defined role, when it was basically Lyon, you're the starter. UPL, you're going to play every couple games. Then Lyon goes down. UPL gets a stretch of games where Lyon's out of the lineup. Colton Ellis isn't ready to play, and then UPL plays great. I don't think that's a coincidence. Now, how do you get UPL to a point where I don't know if it's – and I don't want to make assumptions. I don't know if this is a mental thing. I don't know if this is a luck factor. I don't know if this is just a coincidence. But how do you get UPL to a point where you can expect consistent results on the ice regardless of the circumstance? And how do you find that ideal combo of what works for Lyon when he does come back and what works for UPL? I will say this. I have a higher level of confidence in UPL now than I've had in quite some time. He's playing good hockey, but all it takes is for this fan base to see one bad game out of him to turn on him. So I hope UPL can keep it up. It's nice to see his save percentage over a 90 for the first time in quite some time. But doing it for small stretches isn't going to be good enough. We need to see it for longer stretches. So hopefully he can keep it up and keep the Sabres competitive going forward.
I think this is, again, just one of those many conversations that you ultimately don't really know the answer to until it's over, right? I think you can only say that the direction to go in at any given point was the right one if it's the thing that happens and works out by the time the season's over. And yeah, there was a point where I saw some maybe realistic UPL trades. I saw some very not realistic. And I go, those are like the desperation, like just get this guy out of my city type trades, which are not going to help anything. I saw one, for example, was like trading UPL for Jake Allen straight up. And I think trading for a 35-year-old goaltender is not a great idea at this point. Jake Allen, for what it's worth, on the Devils this year, 11 wins in 22 games played, 255 goals against average and a 913 save percentage that's perfectly good numbers, right? But again, like, he's 35 years old. I don't think that that's what you're looking for right now from the Buffalo Sabres. In saying that, I don't think I have been convinced that the goaltending answer exists right now. I don't want to say in the building for the Sabres, but like in its current form in the building for the Sabres. I don't know that if you tell me that in 3 years, UPL is a 915 save percentage goalie, career, and he continues to be the starter and he gets the majority of the games, I'll be like, okay, that's believable. Now I think what's slightly less believable, is maybe like an Alex Lyon becoming the guy conversation. I just don't know that that's sustainable. And let's say, and I hate doing this, let's say the Sabres do get into the playoffs as a wild card team. And with the East so wide open this year, I don't even know who your first round matchup could possibly be, because it could be any one of 6 teams based on how the wide open the East is. But let's say you're in the first round, you're playing against the Tampa Bay Lightning. I don't think you can start another goalie outside UPL. I kind of think he almost has to be the goalie that starts that, as long as you don't go into, let's say we have 41 games left. If Lyon plays 26 of those, then yeah, he's your starting goalie. But I think right now with the system, I feel like I don't know that there's a great argument in either direction, and that's worrying. But I almost feel like it sort of has to, like, look, UPL kind of is the guy because he almost has to be at this point due to injury, but also situationally. It's almost been like just kind of waiting for him to become that. And now I think it's as good of a time as any. The question, of course, is will it stay that way?
Of course. And the weird thing is, one of our biggest complaint all year has just been like the 3 goalie system, how it's not working. But I've just been thinking, it feels like it almost has been, because one, they've always kind of had someone hurt in a way, but when their whole motto's been, we're going to ride the hot hand. They've been riding the hot hand until something happens, the next guy's up, and really has been the next man's run with it. When you have Alex Lyon to start, Colton Ellis takes over, UPL, or I think Lyon takes it back. Now UPL's on his run. It feels like, as bad as this 3-goalie system is, they're somehow getting away with it with, someone stepping up when needed. And what they're seeing from UPL right now is what they've needed so badly, where, he's making the saves he has to make. We've seen when he started the year, like that first Toronto game, the wrister he gave up from the outside the circles to lead them to lose that game. That sucked. We're not really seeing that from him right now. We're seeing him make, the athletic saves we've always seen from him. We're seeing him be a lot more calm in the crease, which is a huge upgrade for him. And it feels like the team is more confident in him now too, where they're playing a better way of hockey. Defensively too, the Sabres are a lot better than just a few months ago. It sucks with Michael Kessering out. It feels like they were finally, playing at their pinnacle as a team with him there. Unfortunately, he gets hurt for, the third time in a short tenure in Buffalo. So hopefully they can get him back somewhat soon. But they have Jason Zucker back. They are getting, quote unquote, healthier as well. So it's an interesting thing from here. I don't know. I'll have to look right now with the starter for tonight. But, I was shocked in the Columbus game when they were down by so much going to the third. They did not put Colton Ellis in just because we haven't seen him in so long. And now, I don't know if you feel the same way, Bunty, but I'm just nervous to see 92 in net because it's been so long. I don't know what to expect. And it feels like every game just kind of means so much right now.
Yeah, it's one of those things where now it feels like they have enough of an established hierarchy in that to where I really don't want to see Ellis, really. Earlier in the year when it was just earn the job, somebody, like show me you can play, I was a little bit more open to it because none of the three guys really showed that they had earned the starting net or deserved to get the backup reps. Now it feels pretty solidified that one of UPL or Alex Lyon should be in the net on a game-by-game basis. Ellis got hurt. I mean, unfortunate for him that he got hurt before this streak got started, because who knows what he could have done with better defensive play in front of him and a little bit better finishing by the offense. Maybe he would have had a hot streak and we would be saying the same things about him right now. But that's hockey and that's how it goes. And I have this feeling that once Lyon and UPL are both healthy, that probably is going to be it for Colton Ellis this year. I highly doubt the Sabres are going to stick with the 3 goalies once all 3 goalies are healthy. Now, the fact that Alex Lyon's on IR and that Ellis was hurt before him, it's kind of let you keep all 3 because you haven't been forced into making a decision. But once you have all 3 healthy, at that point you kind of have to decide what to do. And I would have to believe that Ellis would be the odd man out at that point. Now, it sounds like Lyon ain't going to be a long-term issue. So this might be like this week, the next 7 to 10 days might be the final reps that Ellis might even get to really show what he can do at this level. So if whatever opportunities he does receive, he's going to need to step up for his NHL career purposes going forward.
Yeah, I think one thing that Gates, you said that I definitely agree with is this time with the 3 goalie rotation, and that we've seen the Sabres do it before. Despite, there being some obvious concerns about it, I think this time what they're doing is, I think as far as the general public goes, they're handling it the way most people want them to handle it, and it seems to be working out. I will say this too. Also, you mentioned maybe not being sure who's starting tonight. As of friend of the show, Johnny Lazarus, has reported earlier today, Ellis was the first goalie off the ice at the morning skate, so it seems like he's going to be the starter tonight. Things could, of course, change because that's how the world works sometimes, but ultimately, he has only played 7 games this year, and that injury kind of came in at the tough time. But I think really this is very much a situation of trust it until it stops working, and then ultimately also don't think that this is just the ultimate solution, which I don't think anyone does. But I'm interested to see how he does tonight against a Rangers team that I think a lot of people in New York are kind of wondering what the deal is with the Rangers, because they are not maybe having the year that they would have liked to have had. One last thought for me on UPL. I wonder how like the Olympics will, if they do, like favor him. I think that could be a beneficial experience. Again, our goal throughout that is health. Like we want to see them do well, right? Excited to see Tage Thompson, excited to see Darlene, UPL, like all that's great. Please come back healthy. That's my goal. And I think ultimately if that happens, they come back with a little bit more confidence too after that experience. That's always a good thing. So I think that is just another reason that might kind of just give UPL that confidence that I think, like Mike said a little bit ago, he seems to play better when he has that and like less of that pressure. So coming off the Olympics, I think that kind of alleviates a few of those things. And hopefully he can kind of continue playing reliable. Although tonight he kind of deserves a night off and he gets one. So we shall 100%. See.
And we've seen the Sabres, really run their goalies too far in recent history. We've seen it in UPL in previous years, whether that be Alex Lyon to start the season this year. It's good to give him these nights off to get him to that point. And I'm excited to see what Colton Ellis looks like as well against this Rangers team. We've seen him step up for the Sabres at times. We've seen some games that are a little lackluster. So, it'll be a big test here for him. And, my final thoughts on the goalie thing before we, talk some bigger Jarmo stuff deadline is not that the Sabres have gotten lucky in this sense, but the management has, where they haven't had to make that move on their 3 goalie system, because the second they're about to, someone does unfortunately go down. So, now that the winning streak's done, we've seen Jarmo be open to making moves. We saw Jason Zucker add to the lineup after the Blue Jackets loss. I think we're at the point now where Jarmo is ready to make moves. We've seen him, make managerial moves. And, the talk this whole year, whether it be Kevin Adams or Jarmo at the helm, is, what's this trade deadline going to look for the Sabres? Are they going to be buyers? We've seen him talk of, being sellers as well. So my question for you, Bunty, we have, the big name like Alex Tuch extension. We saw, I think it was Sarah Valley today put out something that, it's expected that Alex Tuch's going to be met with his $10 million. They have Bo Byram as well, who's playing very well right now. He has 9 points in his last 7 games. He's, really found his game right now in Buffalo. Do you expect the Sabres to be buyers at this deadline? And what future do you see for a guy like Alex Tuch, for a guy like Bowen Byram, especially when the Sabres have a lot of contracts to sign this summer?
Yeah. So the question, do I expect the Sabres to be buyers? It depends on how you quantify buyers. Do I expect them to try to be buyers? Absolutely. Do I expect them to be able to pull something off? That's an entirely different question. I have every ounce of belief that Jarmo is going to try to make a move to get this team over the top to end their drought and make the playoffs. Will he be successful in making such a move? That's a different question. And this comment is entirely correct. That cat does own you right now, Gatesy.
Yeah.
But as far as
right now,
Jarmo's track record, like, we know what he does. He goes out and he is bold. He brings in guys. He brought in Panarin to Columbus at one point in time, a name that the Sabres are supposedly linked to. Who knows how realistic that is, but you are talking about a guy that has an expiring contract, would be a 1-year rental, wouldn't probably have to give up an arm and a leg to make it happen. Now, salary cap, how do you fix that and make it all happen? That's another question and issue. But if you have the financial resources to pull off such a move, and it doesn't take every single thing in your farm system to make it happen, that's an interesting avenue that could maybe get you that additional scoring to really push you over the top. But I whether it's Panarin or somebody else, I expect him to be aggressive, because you think about it. What I love about Jarmo is right off the bat, he basically said, I do have confidence this team can make the playoffs and make a run. And look at how the team has responded to that. I've always thought that the Sabres have had talent, but that there's been a messaging issue within the organization. Whether it's you have a 91-point season and your biggest move afterwards is getting a guy like Eric Johnson. Like, you're not going for it. You keep and then the next year, like, I love Zucker and McLeod, but like, those aren't the guys that you get to say, well, we had 84 points. Next year, we're going for 100. No, like those are guys like we had 84 points. Next year, we're going for 87 points. Like there's always been this lack of boldness by the Sabres. And this offseason actually was quite a good one when you think about the results, getting Josh Stone, bringing in Alex Lyon. Like there's getting, even if you go back to the trade deadline, bringing in Josh Norris. So like the ironic part is Kevin Adams has actually done a decent job bringing a good amount of talent, and he was patient with Matthias Samuelsson, which is paying dividends. Bo Byram, who people thought was a redundancy trade at the time, and just to get something back from Middlestad, has turned out to be one of the Sabres' better players since he's come to Buffalo. So it's kind of ironic that a lot of the moves that we've criticized or have made fun of with Kevin Adams have actually been very impactful to the Sabres, but you can make the argument that the team didn't believe Kevin Adams was ever putting them in a position to win at the highest level. And maybe he was too complacent behind the scenes to where maybe he was nice to the players and they didn't feel the heat and they didn't feel the pressure. And maybe there was too much acceptance of the product on the ice. And, oh, we'll get better. Just give it time, give it time, give it time. And Jarmo comes in and based on all what has come out, basically told the team, not one of you guys is not expendable. Like, you're going to have to deliver. You need to bring results. We believe in you, but just because we believe in you doesn't mean we're going to accept your poor product on the ice. You need to play like your job is on the line. And you hear about how in the West Coast, how Darlene had a leadership summit with some of the Sabres' top players and leaders. And none of this feels like a coincidence. They get rid of Adams, and the mentality, it finally, like, from the outside, appears that it finally connected with the players that, okay, there's no more excuses. We can't blame the general manager anymore. Ownership has shown they're willing to make a change. This general manager has brought in other outside talent evaluators in Mark Bergevin and then in Flynn from Columbus. And now they're trying to do what they can do to win. So it's kind of ironic. It's the same team, but the results look much different. And I always had a suspicion that Lindy wasn't the main issue, which is kind of weird because you normally would connect that more to coaching than higher management. But I think the results of the last 12 games kind of shows it wasn't really a coaching problem. It was the player belief problem for the longest time. And if you go out and you add a high caliber name to this roster, you are telling this entire team, guys, we're not even worried about ending this drought. We're trying to win. Like, we're trying to, like, make the playoffs and then win a series. And I know that
if we sign Taylor Hall, we are not only trying to make the playoffs, we are trying to win the Stanley Cup. This is giving me flashbacks right now, dude. This is we are getting into dangerous.
It's a whole different
team. Panarin is going to bring the Stanley Cup to Buffalo. I'm not saying suburb of Williamsville is never going to love someone more than they're about to love Artemi Panarin, is what this conversation is telling me.
I'm not saying that Panarin's the answer. I'm not even saying that's the guy they should go for. But it's one of those things where you're telling your team, like, I believe you guys can get this job done. And you look at it, there's really not many holes on this roster right now. You look at the forward room. The fourth line is playing the way you'd want to see a fourth line. Like, who are the expendable players on this team? Maybe like a Jack Quinn is expendable. Like maybe you have a plethora of good defensemen, but I don't want to move on. Obviously, like Darlene is safe. I don't want to move on from Samuelsson. I want Power to stay. Some people would say maybe Byram's expendable. I don't want to move Byram the way he's playing right now. So, like, there's a lot of, like, even if you do move on from a player, like, who are you moving on from and what do you get in return? But at the end of the day, like, it'd be stylistically, like, what are you looking to add? Like, right now, I'd say, like, the biggest problem with this Sabres team is their power play. So you'd want maybe somebody that could help enhance your power play. Maybe a sniper or somebody that has a good shot or somebody that can move around a little bit more. So it doesn't need to be like a first line guy or a second line guy, but if it's a guy that could move between your middle lines and then also give yourself a boost on the power play, that's somebody that would be attractive to this team. Physicality wise,
guy too, where we're seeing like Peyton Krebs playing with Tage Thompson right now. If you get a guy in that can play that power play role, that can play with Tage, that can really elevate his game, because right now, like that first line isn't like incredible. I mean, Josh Stone is Josh Stone. Like I think Jay Fresh put out that metric of all the players, and it's like all the Colorado Avalanche and there's like all the Wilds, another team, and then just Josh Stone in the middle of that. If they can get a forward on that line that can really elevate things, obviously we've heard rumors the past couple of days of, Panarin possibly being on the move to Buffalo. There's obviously connections with Yarmo and Panarin in Columbus. Would you want to see the Sabres bring in a guy to play alongside Tage, Vinny, or what does it look like for you at this deadline?
Yeah, it's tough. I do think that's probably where you want the most help, is probably up front. I think defensively, like we're also like Connor Timmins is still injured. He hasn't been in the lineup. Kesselring, of course, like I would love to see him play consistently, but he's obviously been hurt. So I think there's two schools of thought there on the defensive side of things, in that you can try and go out and get another defenseman, and meaning like, hey, we're going to add this guy just because like I don't think Timmins and Kesselring are going to be healthy and back to try to make this postseason push. And then the other side of that is like, look, if we can get these guys healthy, they are the guys we would want to go try and add anyway. So I do think that help is probably up front. Like I admire the way the fourth line is played. I do think that to a certain extent, like I don't know that. And I love him. I love Josh Dunn. I don't know that he's like a guy that you're like, hey, like we want him in the lineup for the NHL playoffs. Perhaps
we're gonna build a team around Josh Dunn,
right? Like, and again, I love. He's proved to be an even more valuable asset than I even originally had thought he was. Coming out of Rochester, of course. Metsa is a guy that's stepping in because of those defensive injuries on like the blue line, right? I've always loved Metsa, but some of the ideas that like, hey, some of these guys you might quote unquote want to be able to send back down as you do get a little bit healthier. But in saying that, like, I think, Krebs is a guy that, again, he's been like almost making you keep him in the lineup. But at the beginning of the season, you would have said he's a bit expendable.
Yep.
And I think and you use the word ironic, Mike, it is true, because so many of these names, when we were talking in October and November, were not good enough. Getting Timmins and getting Kesselring and getting Doan and getting Alex Lyon was not good enough at the time, especially Lyon. I mean, Lyon has been a very nice surprise, and Doan has been better. He's been better than advertised. People liked him, don't get me wrong, but he's been better than advertised. And so overperforming is a great thing, but it is funny how these names, which were not enough 3 months ago, are now suddenly enough to say like, well, maybe we don't need to really add that much. With that said, I do think you do need maybe to find someone that plays a style of game a little bit more sustainable, to not like Quinn is a name that it feels, this might not be statistically as true as it, again, for some people just like watching the games, it like is someone that goes and has a 3-point night and then he doesn't score for 6 games. And then he might go out and have a two goal night, and then he doesn't score for another 4 games. I think you need to limit that a little bit. However, I mean, you can score 2 goals in a game that you need to win against the Capitals in February. Well, then, hey, that's going to help you a lot. But I think that's kind of where I'm leaning, is like to get someone, to help up front there with a little bit more consistency to their game. I will say this about Andy's comment about Tuck. One thing that I'm hoping we get to see this year is Alex Tuck in the Stanley Cup playoffs. What a lot of people forget is that Tuck was really good at scoring goals in the playoffs the first time Vegas went. And I am curious to see if he is still that player that can do that. I think there's another good point. Kulik being out probably until the end of the year. He's skating in sweats, I think I saw today on Twitter. I forget who was the person who tweeted that. But like the chances of him coming back this year are slim. That's a guy that is effectively a top 6 forward that isn't going to be in the lineup.
Can I say something about Kulik though? Honestly, I think the way this season has played out completely changes where I value Kulich now going forward. Like Kulich's good, but the whole reason why we were high on Kulich was he was playing well in his limited sample size last year, and we hadn't seen Noah Ostlund and Isaac Rosen have contributions at the NHL level. Now Ostlund is almost unmovable. Like he's got a spot on this team going forward, regardless. So like Ostlund takes that kind of hurts Kulich from a coming back perspective. And even Rosen was playing at a decent level. So I'll be real. I know if Kulich comes back, he probably stays in the NHL and he doesn't go down to Rochester. In my opinion, Kulich doesn't see the ice again right away once he comes back, even if he is healthy. He needs to earn a spot on the ice because there's guys ahead of him, in my opinion, right now that weren't necessarily ahead of him when he went down. And that's not his fault, but the circumstances have changed. We went from Kulich playing first, second line to now you have a solid first and second line, and you're not going to take guys like Ostlund off the ice for that at the current moment. So that does change a lot, in my opinion, with Kulich. And one thing I do want to carry on the Tuch point you just brought up. Tuch definitely has had success in the playoffs with Vegas. The rumor right now is that he wants between 10 to 11 million. And I know this was part of your question too, Gatesy, that I conveniently didn't answer. I do believe Tuch will eventually re-sign in Buffalo. I think that fans are going to be astonished by how much money he gets and that we're going to be frustrated with the term because looking at Alex Tuch, what's the chances that he's going to be putting in 30 goals, 25 plus goals when he's 35, 36, 37 years old? Probably not that high. But as the salary cap continues to increase over time, the best you can kind of hope is that he can still produce at like a 40, 50 point level as he ages, and that him doing intangibles, while it won't be worth maybe the contract, that he'll still have value and the hit won't be as negative as what it looks like right now for the later years. But for this team, just like I said, go out and try to get a guy for that boost. Could you imagine if they got rid of Tuch right before the deadline when they have everything rolling and it feels like they finally have a chance to snap the drought? That would derail them mentally, I believe, in a big way, unless they got somebody crazy in return. And in my belief, too, is that was ultimately what made Jarmo the guy. It was Kevin Adams was not making any progress with Tuch. The team was in a tailspin. It looked like there was no progress going in. And what has been reported, or at least leaked by reporters in NHL circles, was that a big issue with Tuch and Adams was that Adams was unwilling to go beyond 10 million. So they were basically at an impasse at that point. And the reasoning from Adams' side of things was that he wanted money to re-sign Benson and Doan. And one thing we said on the show last week was those are fair points. Like you need to extend Benson and Doan at some point, and those are higher priorities, I think, long term than Tuch, because you're talking about young players that are going to be part of the future, that are going to be in the prime of their careers. But at the same point, you know what helps extend your young players? Creating a nice culture and environment where you're winning and people want to be part of a future. So there's, in my belief, you can extend Tuch and still find a way to get it done with Doan and Benson. And I think Adams was too focused on just the underlying salary numbers and not focused enough on, that's my job. My job is to figure this out and find a way to make it happen. And Gatesy, your cat loves making appearances on the show, but that's what I'd say at the end of the day. Like that's what Jarmo is embracing. Jarmo is taking it head on. Like, okay, Tuch, this is what you want. This is what it's going to take to get you. I'm going to try to get this done. But you know what? I'm also going to have to find a way to get these other guys done. And maybe Adams was a little bit too hesitant, a little bit too gun shy, worried a little bit too much about the consequences of things down the line, then I need to get this done for the sake of my team going forward.
Yeah, definitely agree. We got some good comments too in the YouTube chat. One from Josh here. He was a Milwaukee guy. I could see him going, maybe Minnesota Wild, maybe Detroit. Can't imagine a big fan of the Sabres or Bills. Appreciate everyone commenting along. Please comment your Sabres questions for us in any sort of the spectrum. We talked a little bit about Tuck. I like that 10 mil number. The thing for me is just the term. Like, in my mind, you can either get paid for a short amount of time or take a longer term deal for less money. I mean, that's kind of been the Kevin Adams model of signing guys long term for not as much as they would get. We really tried to avoid the bridge deals after the disaster we saw with Sam Reinhart. Now you got Tage signed long term, Dahlin, Power, UPL to an extent. So it's interesting to see what this is going to look like for Jarmo and Bunty. 100% right with what you're saying of the Sabres were just at an impasse of they need to make something happen here. If it doesn't happen, like, they need to keep Tuck on this roster unless the absolute worst happens. This team just absolutely nosedives, and God forbid this happens, but you need to make a radical change. Then that conversation might happen. But for now, Alex Tuck will be a member of the Buffalo Sabres throughout this season. It doesn't make any sort of sense to try to, salvage some hypothetical pieces from him for the last couple months of the season, because if they get rid of him, it feels like the whole fabric of this team will fall apart. And yeah, it's interesting to see what's going to happen on that front. But I, for the first time in a long time, I do have faith in the general manager of the Buffalo Sabres and the administration as a whole there. So I'm hoping that number happens. We saw, again, someone today put out the 10 million numbers. That seems more doable. So, it's going to be a long couple months here until we get to the trade deadline. And yeah, a couple more comments I want to look at too. We had Tuck, just Byram as a whole. He felt like a guy this offseason that, in my mind, he was the odd man out. They're going to keep Peterka, and hand up, that was the right move to keep Byram, move on from Peterka, bring in Doan and Kesselring, and they have another year of Byram now. So it felt like for a while, there's going to be sellers going to move on from Byram, try to do a similar flip of guys like they've done with, Cousins and Peterka to bring in, maybe some guys of a similar caliber. But he feels like such a big part of this team right now. And he's really found his groove this last 7 games, even on this win streak. So he's a big part of this team. And there's a lot of guys right now who are finding their stride. And one last thing on the Yuri Kulik part, he was the guy of like those 3 groups of prospects. You had, Kulik, Oslin, and Roseanne. He was the guy that was getting the chances up in Buffalo, throughout last year. This year he was, second line centering that. Now it feels like Noah Oslin is the guy on that 4th line. He has really taken the reins and run with it in a way we haven't really fully seen from Yuri Kulik. So, Bunty, you're absolutely correct. Like, that spot isn't fully there for him. I am excited to see what his game is going to look like in this new, culture of the Sabres where they're playing harder. They're playing the game the right way, where I think I might fit his game a bit better. But, who knows when he's going to come back to this roster, into this lineup. But it'll be interesting to see where the Sabres do slot him, where a guy like Jarmo Kekalainen even values him, because that's not his draft pick. These guys aren't his. I think we've seen in the past of some guys getting elevated in roles to try to, make picks they've made in the past make more sense. But it'll be a very interesting time indeed. Bunty, do you have any final thoughts on, what this deadline is going to look like for the Sabres, or are we feeling good to preview tonight?
Yeah, I'm feeling good. Let's move on to the preview, unless Vinny has anything.
The only thing I want to say is that there's more. The more I look, there are more names that eventually probably deserve a spot on the roster. That I guess this is where you have to. This is where the front office makes their money, right? And deciding who's going to ultimately get to stay here and who isn't. Tyson Kozak is still on IR, and that's a guy that's, I think, a pretty good piece of this lineup when he's in it. And then again, you look. This is probably a couple years down the road, but you obviously are not going to be able to re-sign everybody. And that's where that decision has to come in on who is going to maybe get traded, instead of like, oh, we'll let this guy's contract run out and then we'll re-sign someone or bring someone up. Like, maybe you try to trade a Quinn because you see if Acosta Hellenius can one day fill his spot, if Kulik can come in and play that scoring role on that line when he's healthy. I mean, looking at the Rochester roster, which again has been to a certain extent depleted because of the Sabres needing to pull so many names up from because of injury. Like, there are a couple of guys on this list that I think maybe also deserve a shot up in Buffalo. And it's, Ostlund and Rosén kind of getting theirs this year. Dunn, of course, came up, and he doesn't look like he's going to be in the lineup tonight, which is fine. Kozak is another guy that came, like, all of these guys eventually will, look for a spot in the NHL, of course. Whether that's here or not, I don't know. But you have to think about those names too, because this goes back to that Tuck conversation with the contract and why I want to kind of put a bow on this. That money is not necessarily just for the Bensons of the world that are like on the roster right now in Buffalo. It's also for the guys that are on their entry level deals that might need like contract number 2. And if you can keep, hey, it's like, we're going to keep Benson. If it is Benson and Hellenius more valuable than just Tuck. Now, is that the actual comparison? No, like that's not, apples to oranges, or apples to apples, I guess. But my point in saying that is like, look, I think there's more names in the pipeline than I think we think there is. And that's why there's going to be I bet there's someone on the roster that probably isn't going to stay or does get maybe moved that we aren't expecting simply because there's not room or money for that person. I don't know who it is, but that's what I'm concerned about.
And that's a good point right there. And I think that's been the issue with Kevyn Adams the whole time, where everybody's like, oh, he has so many good draft picks. Well, if you're just replacing the draft picks that you're letting out with new draft picks that are coming in, you're not actually improving the team. You're just going through a never-ending cycle of promoting young players and getting yourself we're the youngest team in the league that has all this potential. What do the best teams do? They build a farm so that they have expendable talent that they can move out if they can have an opportunity to bring somebody in that can be a game changer for them. And we've already seen it work firsthand. The one time they got rid of a prospect.
Savoy and McLeod is a good example.
Savoy for McLeod, how many people were killing them for it? But you know what? You got a proven NHL player. And yes, if Savoy ends up becoming a star, people could have looked back at it and said, oh, you gave up a star for a Ryan McLeod. But you know what? At that point, you know what the Sabres lacked? Guys that could get them 40 points, a lot of speed, and penalty kill contributions. And now you look at the Sabres, McLeod is one of the best penalty killers in the NHL. I believe he has 3 shorthanded goals this year. He is an impact player on both sides of the ice. Is he ever going to be a high-scoring volume player? Probably not. But even in his role last year, he got to 20 goals, which was probably on the high end of what we'll see on a year-to-year basis. But that's a win for the Sabres because they got a proven NHL caliber player who's going to be an impactful player on this team for years to come at the expense of a prospect that they really don't know long-term if he's going to be really good, he'll be good, or maybe he'll be bad. It's kind of like the whole Jack Quinn dilemma. You stay patient with the Jack Quinn for all these years because you hope that at some point in time, he's going to be a 30-goal scorer. Well, you sit on him for 5 years, and now it's pretty obvious that's probably never going to happen. Could it still? Slight chance. Most likely, probably not. So I would love to see the Sabres basically internally scout themselves and see who are some of their expendables, if needed, to make something bold and get them over the hump into the playoffs.
Yeah. It is interesting what that's going to look like. One thing too, with just the players that we've talked about, and Bunty made that good point of just bring in players that can play in this lineup. Like there's a lot of guys in Rochester who, could make a good addition on the Sabres. I think Constellanius is having an incredible year with the Amherst. I think he could be fun on this team, but the Sabres have kind of shown that they don't need to hang on to these guys for too long, especially on the forward side of things. We've seen them give guys defensively time to find their game, whether that be Matthias Samuelsson this year, where there's a lot of talks this summer. The Sabres should just cut him, should just buy him out and be done with it. We're seeing what that at least defensively, what waiting on guys is doing for them, how they're able to find some success from that point. So what this team looks like in just a couple months' time might be different. I'm looking back on what Tage was talking about on Chicklets of Yarmo coming in saying no one here has a job, like you got to find it or you're out. I think initially, at least I was thinking about that of, your bigger guys, like who are established here. They want to make things work. But you look at guys like Jack Quinn, he doesn't have a job here. Like, where is he going to find that job at where he's getting, a line right now with Ryan McLeod and Zach Benson? He gets a shot elsewhere. Who knows where he's going to fit in a lineup like that, what opportunity he's going to have. Like, he needs to be able to find it here. So, we're kind of, slowly approaching the trade deadline, it's interesting to see what this coaching staff is going to do with some of these guys on that quote unquote bubble of the Sabres. So yeah, we got some time till there. The Olympics are, rapidly approaching at this rate. So it feels like moves are going to happen sooner rather than later. And we're about 30 minutes from puck drop for the Sabres in New York against the Rangers. Again, we don't have lineups out right now. The Sabres have that optional morning skate. It appears Colton Ellis will be in net for the Sabres. We'll find out soon as warmups are happening right now. But how are you guys feeling about this game, Bunty? I guess I'll start with you. The Sabres are 1-1 their last 1-11 of the last 12, playing a Rangers team who's, kind of in no man's land right now. There's talks of them trading their superstar. What do you want to see from the Sabres tonight? And, even just a guy like Colton Ellis.
I want to see a win. That's what I want to see.
That's a good start.
Now, as far as will we see a win tonight, you never know in hockey. Hockey, you could be the best team in the NHL and you could lose to the worst team in the NHL on any given night. So hockey, we all know this. It's not football. In football, the better team is going to win probably 70% of the time. But anything can happen. It's nice that they're going to go to MSG and not face Shesterkin. That's a positive. But you never know. The Sabres are a slight favorite. They're coming off a good game. I just want them to find consistency. I don't really, at this point in time, this might sound a little crazy because I obviously want the wins. I'm not as worried about, like, are you winning every single game? Like, you're going to have some losses mixed in with results regardless. I want to see them go out and play the same brand of hockey that they've been playing for the last 3 weeks. Come out, create opportunities, get chances, and if for whatever reason you outshoot the Rangers 35-20 and you lose 3-2, that's how it goes sometimes. I'm not going to be coming on the podcast afterwards and being like, oh, they sucked, like they're horrible. I'm going to be like, okay, they played a solid game, breaks didn't go their way, do this again next game, you probably get back in the win column. So I think the Sabres are the better team. The Rangers definitely appear to be going in the wrong direction as a franchise. The fact that you're even hearing Panarin's name as a trade candidate kind of shows you where they might be at in New York. Expiring contract, looking to just get what they can get. That tells me that the Rangers are very likely or very possibly going to be sellers if they don't find a way to get a stretch of solid hockey soon, which is kind of strange to say because the Rangers are right in this playoff conversation right now too. But realistically, you look at them, they are 4 points back. They've played additional games. It's hard to see the Rangers getting hot enough to where even if they make the playoffs, there'll be any sort of impact team in the playoffs. So at this point in time, this is the type of game where you're Buffalo, you're playing good hockey. Show the Eastern Conference that you can go to the MSG and you can take care of business against one of the, in my opinion, weaker teams in the conference at the current moment.
So we talked earlier about the schedule coming up in regard to how many teams you're playing from the East and West Conference. I did the math quickly. They've played 18 games against teams from the Western Conference. They have 14 upcoming. So it's not as big of it's not like they've played 25 games against Western Conference teams and they have like 7 left. It's not that big of a deficit, but my point in saying that still is these games now matter just as much as they did in November, and yet it feels, of course, like they matter a little bit more here. With that said, this is a night where it's surprisingly a bit of a big turning point for the Rangers. And the reason I say that is this. New York has played 3 more games than Buffalo, however, and they are just 2 points back. So by virtue of games played, Buffalo just, is ahead. And so they could be tied in the standings, but Buffalo has that like games played points percentage tiebreaker. But when saying that, New York right now sits 14th in the East. The record is 20-18-6, but their goal differential is -4. And by winning tonight, they would jump all the way up to a tie for 9th with Buffalo, and they would be 1 point behind Pittsburgh for that 8th spot. And obviously, there's other games going on tonight. There's quite a lot, and this brings another conversation about the NHL schedule. Does anyone know why there's one game tomorrow, and then every team basically plays tonight and Saturday, and then they play one game tomorrow?
Friday night, no hockey on.
Weird. Just weird. The day before you're going to play almost every team in the NHL on Saturday when the NFL playoffs are starting, which happens at 4 and 8 p.m. And then Thursday, which usually has football on, you're also just going to put a bunch of NHL games. And then Friday, when there's the NBA is playing too, so that's fair. But what are we doing here? Anyway, that's a conversation. That's a different conversation. Maybe there's a reason for it. I don't know it, and no one might ever tell me, so who cares? But my point in saying that is this. There's other games going on tonight, which will, of course, change the standings. However, New York is not that far out of it either. They just have a slightly lower points percentage than Buffalo. But we've already talked about how open the East is. They string together 4 wins in a row over this stretch where they're maybe not playing as many games, and then Buffalo plays some. Hey, the Rangers are right back in it. So this is a team that looks like they're maybe not having a great season, and yet it's not that bad. If the Sabres were where the Rangers are, it's kind of hey, they're also not that far out of it, right? And so
I think expectations play a big
correct.
factor in this.
I don't disagree with that at all. I absolutely do not disagree with that at all. But in saying that, I think there's some element of hey, Sabres are playing the Rangers and the Ducks. Ducks started the season strong. Definitely, I think they've lost 8 in a row, if I have that correct, or they've
lost 9 of 10 or something like that. So you are. Yeah.
So Anaheim right now they're 9th. They've lost 3 straight, just outright. And they're 21-19-3. So Anaheim's a team hovering around that same winning, that record type thing that the Rangers are. And yet again, it feels like these teams are not as good. And these are games that, hey, grab these wins while you can. I don't think it's going to be a cakewalk. And Jonathan Quick is, yes, I'm glad to not play Shesterkin. Jonathan Quick is one of the most capable backup goaltenders in perhaps, this is going to be a big stretch. In the last 15 years in the NHL, very few backup goaltenders are better than Jonathan Quick. And that's not just saying because Jonathan Quick is one of the best goaltenders in NHL history, which he is. Even though he's past his prime, he's still very, very good. He just doesn't play a full workload. And therefore, you could get goalied tonight. It could happen. There's all these possibilities exist. And therefore, I just don't want the Sabres to take a game off the way the fans, some of them I'm hearing, might think this could be a game hey, go in and beat the Rangers 5-1. I just don't think that's as easy, especially as we get down the stretch. The Rangers knowing, hey, there's a lot of talk about us getting things shook up here. Let's kind of, dig our boots in. If the players in that locker room in New York think that they have the solution inside that room as well.
Yeah, and this game has a lot of fun storylines too, where we look back to the Sabres getting shut up by Shesterkin early in the year. But the big one is there was a talking point for a while, which is true, that the Sabres couldn't win a road game. They've somehow, evened that out over the win streak. They're now 9-10 on the road, something like that. But the Rangers are on the polar opposite of that, where they can't win a game in MSG. So the Rangers this year at home are 5-10-4, while they're 15-8-2 on the road. They're a team that, struggles at MSG. Our good friend Johnny Lazarus, has been kind of covering that all year. Of the Rangers are struggling at MSG. So the Sabres, get shut out on home ice. They're going to go to MSG, and hopefully try to get one back in that front. I'm excited to see how the Sabres team plays, where we saw them bounce back, at least in the first 50 minutes of the Vancouver game. They gave up a lot of shots, but nothing super high danger. And then we start to see the collapse happen in the third. They put a gap in that. They stopped it. Don't get the empty netter. UPL makes some big saves. They're fine. They get the 2 points. Now I'm very interested to see tonight how they follow that up. They got a little bit of a scare in the third period against a Canucks team who they should handle. What are they going to look like coming out in this game? We saw in the win streak so many times the Sabres giving up goals early in the first, only to kind of, we should be playing right now, find their game and go from there. So you're playing a Rangers team with their backs up against the wall a little bit. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of talk about this team, what they're going to look like. Are they going to be selling? They're going to start a rebuild now. What's that going to look like for them? So I think you're going to have a Rangers team going to come out a little hot. I want to see the Sabres weather this storm tonight, take advantage when they can. You have Jonathan Quick, who is so much fun to watch. He's been, my favorite goalie growing up that's not named Ryan Miller. So interesting for the Sabres tonight, what they're going to do there. And then just Colton Ellis with him in net, it's the goaltending matchup of the century of Colton Ellis and Jonathan Quick. So should be a fun duel there. And yeah, I'm excited to see 92 in net. He's a goalie that does scare me when he's in between the pipes. So hopefully he can get some shots early, can field the puck, and the Sabres can move from there. So yeah, we have 17 minutes until puck drop, give or take. So until we get to that point, Bunty, we're at a halfway point in the Sabres season. There's a lot that's happened, a lot of guys out of the lineup, a lot of guys back. It feels like we've had 20 Sabres seasons in just these few short months. I just want to know, like, where are you at, wrapping things up with this episode, but this half of the season? If I would have told you in early October that the Sabres would be 1 point out of, wild card spot, a couple points out of just an Atlantic spot, how would you feel about that? How are you feeling about the team right now? And, what's something you have your eyes on moving forward?
Yeah, before the season, I would have taken this situation. I had the Sabres for around 87 points before the year, which is kind of funny because at that point in time, a lot of people thought I was crazy for that. And I remember all the charts and graphs that I would share from metrics, analysts and stuff like that who would project the Sabres to be around 90, 91 points. And there's a lot of tweets where people are laughing and they're insulting them. And then the Sabres lose a couple games to open the year and people are saying this team stinks and they're horrible. And it just shows that there are so many negative overreactions to this team, not because of what was actually on the ice, but just because it just took over this organization and this franchise with all the losing. And it just cultivated such a negative culture within the fan base and everything. And not saying that's undeserved. Like, I get it. Like, you should be angry when your team misses the playoffs 14 straight years. But what we always kind of said in the beginning of the year was, let's see what this team looks like when they're healthy, and can they stay in it until they're healthy? And it's funny because it feels like Josh Norris has been playing forever now, but he's only played 14, 15 games this year, and he's a point per game player. And it coincides with a stretch of hockey in which the Sabres are winning all the time. So it's interesting because I got some of the metrics in front of me right now. The Sabres are 12th in expected goals for per 60 minutes. And they're 11th in expected goals allowed per 60 minutes. And this is the number that's really changed quite a bit. Goals saved above expected. They're now up to 16th in the league. And then even goal differential percentage, 16th in the league. Their shot quality is 9th in the league. Like, those are all good underlying numbers. And what was kind of happening earlier in the year when the Sabres were struggling was their expected goals were in the top 15 areas, but their expected goals allowed was still pretty low, and their goaltending was pretty low. Their power play was getting by, and their penalty kill was very good. Right now, you look at a team that 5-on-5, pretty solid offensively, but the same level defensively. And with that, the goaltending has gotten more consistent. The penalty kill is second in the league. There's really only one huge weakness when you look at this team right now, and it's the power play. And they had a stretch where they were finishing, but now they've kind of gotten back into a little bit of a rut on the power play. So they need to go back to the drawing board and try to figure that out and get that back on track. But when I look at this team right now, it's not that it's perfect. It's far from perfect. But when you have Josh Doan in there and he's contributing, not Josh Doan, pardon me, Josh Norris in there, and he's contributing at the level that he is, and you already have a Tage Thompson and you have an Alex Tuck, and then you bring in guys like a Josh Doan that's doing some of the gritty work, and Benson has elevated his game this year, and Krebs is being a pain in the ass for opponents, even if he's not putting up high-level stats. And you now have Matthias Samuelsson contributing at a super high level, and you have Byram getting in on the rush and making plays and setting up guys. You got a pretty balanced team. And the thing that's nice about balance is on a nightly basis, you don't need to depend on one or two players to carry your entire roster. And I feel like for the last decade, or ever since they had Eichel and Reinhart at the helm, it was, we need Eichel to score a goal today or we have no chance. We need Reinhart to score. We have no chance. And then afterwards, it kind of went to, we need Thompson to carry this team tonight or we have no chance. Right now, it's a bunch of different guys stepping up. And with the improved defensive play, our goaltending can even win us a game every once in a while. Balance brings consistency. Consistency, when you're good, leads to improved records, making the playoffs, and having a chance on a nightly basis. I don't think the Sabres are anywhere close to a finished product, but I'm very encouraged by what they're putting together. And if they can stay healthy, it's a team that has the potential to, like I said earlier, and I know people don't want to get on this ship yet because it's a little premature. If this is what they are and they can carry this into the playoffs, assuming that they can make it, it's a team that might even pull off a shocking first-round series win. But you got to make the playoffs first. I'm not saying they're Stanley Cup contenders, but you look at the rest of the division. Is Detroit that much ahead of the Sabres? No. Is Montreal that much ahead of the Sabres? Head-to-head they have been, but like on paper, they're not. Tampa, I mean, like you'd say name recognition they are. Florida obviously has gone to 3 straight cups. They're still dealing with some things. Things are open right now. Don't worry about the past. Take advantage of it and see where it takes you.
To a certain extent, that conversation can kind of be summed up as like Columbus swept the Lightning that one time. Like, I don't think anybody expected that to happen, right? So you just kind of got to get there and play the games and see what happens. But look, I think one thing that I'm kind of thinking tonight is, just kind of continue to prove that you can play hockey at the level you've been playing hockey at. I'm going back to that, the conversation that I kind of jumped in at the show and we were talking about early was like I was trying to compare the 2 10-game win streaks and why the first one ended up flawed. And this one, of course, you hope it is not. The first reason for that right away is, hey, after that 10-game win streak, where for those who may not remember, that 10-game win streak with 2018-2019 season started on November 8th. They beat Montreal in overtime, then Vancouver in a shootout, which for what it's worth, that was a great Vancouver game. I believe they were down 3-0 and then came back to win in a shootout. They scored 2 goals late in the third. I know Reinhart scored 1 and it went like flying into the boards. Because I remember watching it at my friend's house. Just, vivid memories of random stuff. So then that's 2 like extra games, right? You played overtime and then shootout. Beat the Lightning 2-1. So that's a 1-goal game for what it's worth. Then you beat the Jets in a shootout, 3-2, 1-goal game against the Wild. Overtime win against Pittsburgh, 5-2 win against the Flyers. The only one where like you definitely were and did win the game. And then to just kind of go down the rest of the line after that Flyers game, the remaining 3 are an overtime win against Montreal, a shootout win against Detroit, and an overtime win against San Jose. Then after that, first of all, and I texted this to you guys, and I don't know how many people will remember this also. Most people probably don't remember. I did not. I went down a YouTube rabbit hole the other night, and I realized that the 10th game of that 10-game winning streak where Skinner scored in overtime on like Martin Jones when he turned the puck over, like in the offensive zone, right? And Skinner gets it back, scores in the backhand, and it was great. Yeah. That game was the same game that Rasmus Ristolainen walked Brent Burns, went through the legs, and then scored, and then did his like celebration thing. Did not realize that was the same game at all. Now I remember I watched that whole game with my dad, and I remember feeling so good. I was like, oh my God, this is what it feels like to watch a good hockey team again because of how fun that game was. And I didn't remember quite why, except for the fact that they won at the end of it. That Ristolainen goal in the like early stages of it certainly helped. Okay, let me finish my point. That 10-game win streak, which had 6 games that went to overtime and 3 of the remaining 4, which were 1-goal games, was followed up immediately by a 5-game losing streak. Did they go to overtime in 2 of those 5 games? Yes, but then they lost. So with that said, it also, they end the 5-game losing streak with an overtime win, another win, and then they lost 3 of 4, 4 of 5, and 4 of 6 in their next 20 games or whatever it is. So they fell apart immediately after. The good thing right now is the Sabres did lose a game You're going to lose hockey games. They won another one. Here's my final thought, because I kind of started rambling, even though I didn't mean to. I want to see, again, sustainable brand of hockey, and I do like the idea of Zucker being back in the lineup as a guy that knows how to win. If you can kind of teach some of the guys on this team that do know how to win, credit somewhat to the Rosans and the Oslins of the world, because they know how to win, at least in Rochester. Maybe not in the postseason. Rochester, of course, has struggled to get to the Calder Cup finals, but they've been good. I think you're starting to find some pieces of guys who are just used to winning to a certain extent. And if you can just plug that in a little bit and then get these guys that have been on the Sabres for a while also back used to that, like, hey, this is how we win hockey games, that's a good thing. They're winning in different ways. They've been down in the first, they've come back. They've gone up, and then they've blown the lead, and then they've held on to it. It's a close game. They park the bus, hang on, and they win. And I think that, like, being able to find wins is like, all right, hey, look, if our top line isn't scoring and they're turning the puck over a bunch, well, guess what? Our depth is going to help. If our defensemen are allowing a lot of high danger chances, our goalies are going to bail us out today. Oh, you know what? The other team has got us in a boat race. All right, you know what? Like, our offense is a gong show. Let's go score some goals. Oh, our special teams can get it done. The penalty kill can lock down these units. I think being able to say that each of these units are contributing, maybe not every night, but on a night-by-night basis, you're finding, 4 of the 5 pieces of the puzzle are working, is confidence instilling, because you can say, hey, if I don't have a great game, I don't have to be that down. I don't have to, like, hold the stick tighter, as a coach would say, right? Like, you can just let it go knowing, all right, I have confidence. These guys are going to pick me up. And that, I think, is an ingredient to a good hockey team. And I think that's one thing that the Sabres need to just continue to do. Don't hold the stick too tight. If you are not the reason they are winning, you'll have your night. Let those other units kind of boost you. And I think they've been able to do that. I just hope they can continue doing that with the personnel they have. Asterisks to all of this, just got to stay healthy.
Yeah, and we've seen guys step up for the Sabres over this run. We've seen guys like Tage Thompson, Rasmus Dahlin not really, be to the level we've seen in certain years. And I mean, that's why they've had their success. They're not relying on these guys. The whole team's really stepping up in moments. They're going to need that again tonight. And, once we see Dahlin and Tage get to this super, hero level, at least in some capacity, especially from a guy like Dahlin, the sky really is kind of the limit for how this team is playing. They have to stay healthy, keep playing the way they are. We've seen in years past them kind of get a little bit too big for their britches and, not play the way that gave them success. It feels like, from what we're seeing, what we're hearing, that's not going to be the issue anymore. So, we have puck drop here in a couple minutes. I want to thank the over 2,000 people stopping in tonight to hear us pregame the Sabres and Rangers for a Buffalo Sabres team that's halfway through their year, 1 point out of a wild card spot. You have an East that is just a couple points separated from first to last. It is truly going to be an eventful second half to the season. I want to thank everyone for tuning in tonight throughout the course of the season and beyond. I've been Gatesy, joined as always by @Mike_Bundt, @VCristiano3. We have been the Crossing Swords podcast presented by Batavia Downs Gaming Hotel. Folks, let's hopefully get a W tonight. Let's go Sabres.